You are trying to control something that was never meant to be controlled. The very act of grasping at life, of attempting to organize and manage every detail of your existence, is the source of your deepest suffering. You see, the moment you decide that life must go according to your plan, you've already lost. You've separated yourself from the flowing river of existence and declared war against the current. And in this war there is no victory, only exhaustion, frustration, and the perpetual illusion that if you could just try harder, think smarter, or plan better, you would finally achieve that elusive state of perfect control. But what if I told you that the very thing you're fighting against is the source of all power? What if the secret to mastering your life lies not in tightening your grip, but in loosening it entirely? This is the great paradox that Western civilization has spent centuries avoiding. We've been taught that to succeed, we must dominate. To achieve, we must force. To create security, we must build walls and systems and strategies. We've turned life into a problem to be solved, a chaos to be ordered, a wild horse to be broken and tamed. And so we spend our days wrestling with reality, pushing against what is, demanding that the universe conform to our blueprints and expectations. We treat life as though it were an enemy, something inherently untrustworthy that must be constantly monitored and managed. We cannot rest, cannot surrender, cannot simply be, because to do so would be to admit that we are not in charge, and that admission feels like death itself. But here's what you haven't realized. The controller is an illusion. The separate self that believes it's steering the ship, making decisions, and determining outcomes is nothing more than a thought pretending to be a captain. You are not a little person sitting inside your head, pulling levers and making choices. You are the entire process, the thinker and the thought, the controller and the controlled, all arising together in one seamless movement of existence. When you try to control your life, it's like your left hand trying to control your right hand. They're both expressions of the same organism, and the conflict between them is pure imagination. Think about it this way. When you breathe, do you control your breath? Or does the breath happen, and you simply notice it? When your heart beats, are you making it beat? Or is the beating occurring as part of the vast intelligence of your body? And when a thought appears in your mind, did you choose that thought? Did you sit down and consciously construct it word by word? Or did it simply arise seemingly from nowhere? The truth is, almost everything that happens in your life emerges without your conscious control, and yet you take credit for some things and blame yourself for others, all while maintaining this elaborate fiction that you are the author of your experience. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have no agency, no ability to influence your circumstances. What I'm pointing to is far more subtle and far more profound. You are not separate from the world you're trying to control. The boundary between you and everything else is a mental construct, a useful fiction for navigating everyday life, but not an ultimate truth. When you really look at yourself, where do you end and the environment begin? Are you separate from the air you breathe, from the food that becomes your body, from the culture that shaped your thoughts, the language that structures your consciousness, the relationships that define your sense of self? You are not a thing in the world. You are something the world is doing, just as a wave is something the ocean is doing. When you understand this, really understand it, not just intellectual vows, but in your bones, the whole game of control reveals itself as absurd. You've been trying to control yourself, to manage and manipulate this separate entity called me, without realizing that the controller and the controlled are the same process. It's like trying to make your hand catch itself or your eye see itself without a mirror. The effort itself creates the illusion of separation, and the illusion of separation creates the need for more effort. You're caught in a loop, chasing your own tail, and the faster you run, the more exhausted you become. This is why all your attempts at perfect control inevitably fail. You make plans, and life laughs. You build structures, and they crumble. You create routines and systems, and something unexpected always breaks through. And instead of recognizing this as the very nature of reality, which is fluid, spontaneous, and fundamentally uncontrollable, you interpret it as personal failure. You think, I need to be better, stronger, more disciplined, more careful. But the problem isn't that you're not trying hard enough. The problem is that you're trying to do something that's impossible in principle. You're trying to freeze a river, to pin down a cloud, to capture the wind in your fist. The Eastern philosophical traditions understood this deeply. They saw that life is a dance, not a march. It's a play, not a mission. And the art of living well isn't about forcing the universe to obey your will, but about aligning yourself with the fundamental nature of things. The Taoists called this Wu Wei, effortless action, or action through non-action. It doesn't mean being passive or lazy. It means acting in harmony with the natural flow of events, the way water flows downhill without trying, the way a plant grows toward the sun without effort. It means recognizing that you are part of an intelligence far vaster than your conscious mind, and learning to trust that intelligence rather than constantly second-guessing it. Consider how you learned to walk. As a child, you didn't study biomechanics or create a detailed plan. You fell down repeatedly, you experimented, you played with balance and movement, and gradually your body figured it out. There was no separate you controlling the process. The learning happened spontaneously through trial and error and adaptation. And now, when you walk, do you consciously command each muscle, coordinate each step? Of course not. You simply intend to walk, and your body does this incredibly complex thing without any conscious control. The same is true for speaking, for digesting food, for healing a wound, for falling in love. The most important and miraculous things in life happen without your deliberate control. But somewhere along the way, you developed this idea that your conscious mind needs to be in charge of everything. You began to distrust the spontaneous intelligence that's been running your body since before you were born. You started to believe that if you're not constantly thinking, planning, and managing, everything will fall apart. And so you've imposed this tyrannical little dictator, the ego, on top of the natural flow of your being. And now you're exhausted from its demands. The ego loves control because control creates the illusion of separation. And separation is what the ego is made of. The ego is nothing but the sense that you are a separate self, isolated from the world, in competition with others, fighting for survival and significance. It thrives on problems because problems need someone to solve them. It loves fear because fear reinforces the sense that you're vulnerable and need to be protected. And it absolutely requires the feeling that you're in control, or at least that you should be, because without that feeling, what would the ego be? If there's no separate self trying to control things, what's left? What's left is what you actually are, not the thought of yourself, but the awareness in which all thoughts arise, not the controller, but the living presence that witnesses both the desire to control and the futile efforts at control. You are the space in which all experience happens, not a particular experience trying to manage all the others. And when you recognize this, when you really see it, the whole burden of control simply drops away. You don't have to get rid of it or overcome it or transcend it. You simply see that it was never real in the first place, and the seeing itself is the liberation. Now, this doesn't mean you stop making decisions or taking action. You still plan vacations, pursue careers, maintain relationships, solve problems. But the quality of your action changes completely. Instead of acting from a place of fear and separation, constantly trying to force reality into alignment with your preferences, you begin to act from a place of clarity and wholeness. You respond to situations as they arise with intelligence and creativity, but without the underlying anxiety that everything depends on your control. You become like water, powerful in its softness, able to wear away stone not through force but through persistence and adaptability. Think of a skilled musician. When they play, are they controlling every note, consciously managing every finger movement? In a sense, yes. They've practiced, they know the piece, they're deliberately creating music. But in another, deeper sense, the music is playing through them. They've practiced so much that technique has become second nature, and now they're not thinking about control. They're simply flowing with the music, responding to it, dancing with it. The greatest performances happen when the musician gets out of their own way and lets the music play itself. And life is like this. When you've learned the basics, when you've developed skill and understanding, the art of living well comes not from more control, but from less interference. This is what it means to let go of control, not to become passive or careless, but to stop interfering with the natural intelligence. He that's already operating. Your body knows how to heal itself better than your conscious mind does. Your heart knows how to love better than your calculated strategies do. Your intuition knows how to navigate complex situations better than your anxious overthinking does. But you've been trained to distrust all of this. to believe that the conscious, calculating, controlling mind is the only legitimate source of wisdom. And so you've cut yourself off from the very wellspring of intelligence that could actually guide you skillfully through life. The irony is that the more you try to control, the less control you actually have. When you're rigid, you break. When you're desperate to manage every outcome, you become brittle and anxious. When you insist that life conform to your expectations, you suffer constantly because life has its own agenda. But when you relax into the flow, when you trust the process, when you allow life to unfold without constantly trying to manipulate it, you discover a kind of power that doesn't come from force. You become flexible, resilient, creative. You're able to work with reality rather than against it. And paradoxically, you become far more effective in achieving what truly matters to you. So what does this look like in practical terms? How do you actually let go of control without feeling like you're surrendering to chaos? First, you have to understand that letting go of control is not the same as abdicating responsibility. You're still going to show up for your life. You're still going to do your best, make decisions, take action, but you're going to do it from a different place inside yourself, not from the contracted, fearful place that says, I must make this happen or everything will fall apart, but from the relaxed, confident place that says, I'll do what I can, and I'll trust that the rest will unfold as it needs to. This requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to outcomes. Right now, you're probably attached to very specific ideas about how things should go. You have a picture in your mind of your ideal life, your ideal self, your ideal circumstances, and you're constantly measuring reality against this picture and finding it lacking. This attachment to specific outcomes is what creates so much suffering, because life is not going to conform to your picture. It never has, and it never will. Life is too vast, too complex, too mysterious to fit into your little mental box. But when you can hold your preferences lightly, when you can say, I'd like this to happen, but I'm open to being surprised, then you're no longer at war with reality. You're dancing with it. Start paying attention to the areas where you're trying to control things that can't be controlled. You can't control what other people think of you. You can't control the weather, the economy, or the traffic. You can't control whether you get sick, whether you age, whether you eventually die. You can't even control your own thoughts and emotions. They arise spontaneously, whether you want them to or not. And yet, how much of your energy are you spending trying to manage these uncontrollable things? How much mental bandwidth are you wasting on worries about what might happen, on strategies for preventing unwanted outcomes, on elaborate plans to ensure that everything goes your way? What if you took all that energy and redirected it towards something more fruitful? What if instead of trying to control the uncontrollable, you focused on responding skillfully to whatever arises? This is the essence of wisdom, knowing the difference between what you can influence and what you cannot, and having the clarity not to waste yourself on futile battles. You can influence your actions, your words, your habits, your attitude. You can cultivate qualities like patience, kindness, courage, and clarity. You can show up fully for your life, giving your best to each moment without holding back. But you cannot control the results. The results will be what they will be, emerging from causes and conditions far beyond your individual power. And here's the beautiful thing. When you stop trying to control everything, you discover that you're already being taken care of, not in some magical supernatural sense, but in the very natural sense that you are part of a universe that has been managing to exist for billions of years without your supervision. The same intelligence that grows your hair and digests your food and beats your heart is the intelligence that moves the planets and creates galaxies and brings forth all of life. You are not separate from this intelligence. You are a manifestation of it, and it's far more trustworthy than your small, worried mind could ever be. This is what real faith is, not belief in some external deity who will reward you if you're good, but trust in the fundamental nature of existence itself. Trust that life knows what it's doing, even when you don't. Trust that the universe is unfolding exactly as it needs to, even when it doesn't match your preferences. Trust that you are exactly where you need to be right now, learning exactly what you need to learn, even if it's uncomfortable or confusing or painful. When you cultivate this kind of trust, you begin to experience a profound freedom. You're no longer carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. You're no longer responsible for making sure everything turns out right. You can relax into this moment, fully present and alive, without the constant background noise of anxiety about the future or regret about the past. You discover that life becomes much simpler and more enjoyable when you're not fighting it all the time. But this isn't something you can force. You can't control your way into letting go of control. That would be just another paradox, another trial. Instead, it happens through seeing, through clear, direct perception of how things actually are. When you really look at your experience, without the filter of your beliefs and assumptions, you begin to see the ways you've been creating your own suffering through unnecessary control. And in that seeing, something naturally releases, not because you made it release, but because it was never really there in the first place. It was just a habit, a pattern, a dream of separation. So I invite you to rest for a moment in the simple recognition that you are not separate from this vast, mysterious process called life. You are not a lonely ego struggling against a hostile universe. You are the universe experiencing itself, playing at being you, pretending to be separate, so that it can have the joy of discovering its own unity. And in this discovery, there is no controller and nothing to control. There is simply this breath, this moment, this alive presence that has never needed your permission to be exactly what it is,